Hello. So this is quite interesting episode that I was just preparing for giving a small talk about how I select the problems to solve and what kind of apps or solutions I'm looking for. And while preparing this talk, I was making this small mind map that I just want to share with you, but also give some commentary about how I think about what kind of problems are worth working on. And I would explain my personal framework, but it's also I was heavily inspired by what's already is in the industry. So usually this is one of my most favorite tools. It's called Whimsical. I really like it, and what I do here is I try to explore the definition of useful projects for me. And by saying this, I usually work only on those. I usually prefer working only with them. So I just want to kind of share with you what I include in this definition by default. So first of all is having a real problem. I will open a bit more about this later, but another parameter that I think is important is scale of the problem or scale of the project that I will be working on. Then there is a pain level of the problem. This is quite interesting because the world right now is heavily flooded with the problems that we are having, but the problems are quite different. Someone is very depressed that they cannot have a favorite ice cream for the dessert, while other people have a hunger problem in the whole nation. So the pain level is quite different, though, although people experience it quite differently and not as adequately, I would say, scientifically correct to the real integration of this problem, but I will mention about it a bit later. So, and then there is also a solution feasibility. So what exactly can be built and should be built, and what would be the best solution in that on that level at this stage of this problem as well. So whenever I tell about the problem reality or the how real I think the problem is, I think it's important to work on high frequency problems that people are faced with every day. Usually people eat every day, they go to work most of the time, they socialize in some ways, they have their routine lives, they care about their safeties, and usually the most real problems that people are needed, the most real problems needed to be solved are high frequency problems. So those that appear regularly, sometimes multiple times per day, sometimes several times per week, but they reappear no matter what status the person is. So usually it just covers as many people, but it also tries to challenge how these problems are influencing us every day. And so this is where the scale problem comes in. So some problems are just so too how to say it, they're so detailed and tailored to the certain types of people. For example, imagine a club of supercar owners, for example. They all bought a supercars, so they have different fan bases, they have their own clubs, but the amount of these people is not large enough to build a dedicated product for them, because you will never have enough voices and enough of foundation for building more and more features. You'll probably stuck at serving only small portion of people, and it will be really hard to scale it because buying a supercar is not really regular problem for most of the people in the world. So how I usually define scalability is that the problem or the solution would be presented for millions of people. Usually, if there is at least million of people who struggle with something, you can definitely build a product. But sometimes this segment is even lower. For example, there might be thousands, even like 10,000 people. Imagine if you would solve something for 10,000 people and they would buy it from you, like for, I don't know, for $1 or even more, you are set for life. So what you have to do is to find probably a segment of million people, but build good enough product and marketing to serve at least some segment of it. But by building it for millions in advance allows you to scale it in the future without any issues. So this is one of the most important parameters, is to have the target audience good from the start, because even if you will not be able to create the perfect product for them, you will be able to tailor and change the product on the fly, so it would serve different segments inside of this large target audience user base, instead of building something for a very specific user base where it's harder to change and move inside, and just generally it might be too suffocating to move in one space. Also, what I like to call is nations. It's not necessarily nations geographically, but more like there are groups of people who are connected by some parameters. For example, there are creative people, and I call it like creative nation. There are like very I don't know how to say it, very fact-checking, concrete people who likes to analyze a lot of stuff, who work on financial like side of jobs or something. They have their own perspective of things. They have their own problems in life of, I don't know, audit and stuff, and trying to systemize everything. So there are nations of people which it's easier to imagine, and it's easier to segment people by some of their properties or some of their variables that you can control whenever you start working on the product. So, and then there is a pain level, which I already mentioned. There is a popular framework of what can be considered like a pain level in broader terms. One of them is, for example, snakes and vitamins. This is something that we would absolutely live without, but it's good to have them. Usually these kind of products are selling if the marketing is good, but these are not the first stuff that comes up in our minds whenever we live our day, like every day, with having our own problems. Another level is something that usually called painkillers. This is usually something that is really frustrates person throughout the day or throughout their life, and they are desperately looking for something, or they might not realize it, but they would be really relieved when they found a solution to something that bugs them. I think this naming is pretty good, especially for painkillers, because usually good products do exactly that. They need usually less marketing, but they still need some kind of be exposed to future audience in order to be useful for them. And there is also, I call it like antibiotics. I don't know if I'm it's actually one of my additions to how to say, to this framework. I think there is this, like, the product that's hard to live without, and they don't need a lot of marketing at all, but they eventually become so monopolizing when they really solve some really painful problem. I don't know, the first banks might be antibiotic, but then they kind of began to be painkillers, but they are still like kind of required to live in the modern world, right? So you will end up with a bang anyway in the modern world. So I think it's somewhere on this scale. And for example, I don't know, vaccines don't need a lot of marketing right now, at least, right? It will probably be more marketed driven in the future, or they're marketed driven inside of the organizations who are responsible for buying vaccines, but they're not like requiring general I don't know, banners that, hey, our vaccine is better than other. Yes, they do that, but they don't like, everyone understand that the concept is already created and it's already something needed for the people. So, and there is also an interesting parameter which I call feasibility. So usually the problem with this is that depending on the solution that you want to build, it matters what kind of how you will eventually build the building process and what do you want to target for. So for example, sometimes the technology is already available and you don't need to kind of create something new to start new research. You just have to use current knowledge that people have, current markets, current best practices, just combine together and try to make it work. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's still something building out of the blocks that already exist, out of the knowledge that already exists. Good example is usually apps and something that just solves like problems in a new ways, but there is also some alternatives to it. So it's not really, it's usually comes to snacks and vitamins, but also painkillers a bit, but it's not something that is really requires a lot of research and might like really solve antibiotics like type of issue. It can't solve, for example, you cannot code a solution that would solve a world hunger, for example, right now. You will have to combine the, for example, development of technology and organizational stuff and administration stuff, marketing, in order to create a solution for that, but it still has to be researched. And this is probably like, it comes, for example, with the world hunger, or I don't know, preventing wars in the future. This is more like infrastructural or future vision problems, where it's important not only to create some kind of solutions right now, but you are kind of optimizing for the future solving of this problem. So you are, for example, gathering a group that would solve it. And this is kind of different type of solution, but it still comes like closer to the final solution and to resolving some of the problems. The interesting part is that those are also kind of branching out to different types of the problems. For example, sometimes the problem might, like the solution to a problem might already exist, but the marketing wasn't so good to actually penetrate the market and to serve those people. So sometimes the main challenge for the tech startups is not tech at all. It's just marketing of delivering the value to people, which sometimes might be hard. Or for example, marketing would be solved, but it would be solved in a small country where everything works together, but you don't know how to get, for example, to North America and scale it there with different mentality, but for like 300 thousands, millions of people. I'm sorry. There is a huge like globalization problems, I would say, and we have so much ideas to not only to steal or do, but also to globalize and to adopt them in different markets. So I think this really greatly encapsulates how I think about this. What I wanted to explore also is what kind of like how I usually think about problem categorization, I would say. Usually what I do is I try to list all of the stuff that people are struggling today with, and I'm just trying to be as open as possible, as abstract as possible, to avoid getting too precise at this moment. And I usually just state stuff that I see every day with my own eyes. For example, people are tired, or people are hungry, people are feeling lonely, people don't feel satisfied with their jobs, people are not feeling productive in their jobs, people are people are feeling busy without getting some great results, people are not rich. It also might be a problem if people are trying to be rich, but they cannot become those. So the point of this exercise is to be as abstract as possible, and then to kind of really start from the most abstract point and then get down to how can we change that and how can we influence this moment for the people and really change something. But for example, in case of like people are tired, there are many solutions that you might come up with. So for example, you could decrease the amount of work they do, or you could change the format of the jobs. For example, people like are tired of working on one job, they need two, and sometimes counterintuitively working on two part-time jobs is actually giving you more energy because it's more interesting. It's like giving you more social circles and stuff like that. So it instantly reignites a lot of ideas in your head on how can you really help people changing it, and then you can come up with a solution that might help this. For example, on combining jobs or changing the whole essence of the job, you might probably want to build a site which explains this idea, or it will be a job listing site where jobs are okay at being like part-time, like realized, and everyone would be happy from having it. But having this like abstract point of view helps you to understand, are you really solving the real problem of people, or you came up with the problem of, for example, people want to I don't know, there is a problem, for example, it's hard for people to buy a car right now. Like it's hard for people to buy a BMW right now. It's so frustrating process for them. It's probably not. There are many types of problem that is connected to those. For, I don't know, for example, it's harder to get money to buy a car. They don't want a car, but they want to appear rich to their friends. They want to state something to their parents and that's why they want to buy a car. They're just too lazy to buy it because it's not their intrinsic value. So I'm just fantasizing right now, but it's really clear, like this kind of framework allows me to focus on the real painful problems and like problems that people have right now. And then I also try to combine those different mind maps to understand what kind of solutions should I build and should I work on this like in general. For example, what I usually like is to connect and sort the problems on the pain level idea. So what I do is, for example, whenever I build the type of problems I see, I try to like ideate on if I should solve it in which way. So for example, the problem of being hungry in the world is probably a first world problem that we have to solve it immediately. That's why it's red and it's in my antibiotics scale. But when people are busy with something, it's probably more of like a painkiller problem that if we will solve it, it would be good. But if we will not solve it, people will just live forever until they themselves will figure it out somehow. And then there's, for example, people are bored problem. People who created TikTok is a great example of how they used it. Doesn't mean that the problem is small or the problem is not bad, but this is the problem that would be solved anyways in one way or another by creating another way of not being bored. Nothing really change in the world unless you come up with bigger mission, for example, connecting people or influencing using groups or creating communities inside of the apps and so on. So I just wanted to share this because many people ask of, hey, how do you come up with the startup ideas, or I'm not like creative to come up with one. This is just how I think, and I hope it was useful just to get inside of my head for a bit. So yeah, see you later.